He made history as his law school's first black valedictorian, but his real speech wasn't on stage. It happened at the dinner table, surrounded by wealth and quiet disapproval. They didn't expect him to command the room. Not the trustees in the front row with their stiff ties and fake smiles, not the donors skimming their programs, not the professors who praised his work behind closed doors but avoided his gaze in the halls, and definitely not the Wainwrights, sitting halfway back with polite smiles and folded arms, already thinking about dinner. But Elijah Grant didn't come to meet their expectations. Standing on Stanford Law's stage, his tassel brushing his cheek, he gripped the podium and scanned the crowd, not nervously but with purpose. His mother sat 2 rows from the back, tears on her cheeks, hands clasped like she was still in Sunday church. Then he began. No notes, no hesitation. 3 years ago I walked into this building and didn't see a single face like mine in the faculty wing. The room quieted. 2 years ago, I fought a case where black tenants were illegally forced from their homes. A professor told me to pick battles that actually mattered in court. The silence grew heavier. Last year, a federal judge said I was too assertive for his clerkship. A pause. I got the job anyway. Laughter cut through the tension, sharp, knowing. Elijah allowed himself a small smile. His voice was calm, steady, not angry, not performative, just sure. He spoke about the law not as a tool of control, but as a reflection of values. Fairness wasn't just an ideal, it was something you fought for, especially in rooms like this. I didn't come here to belong, he finished. I came to build something that outlasts all of us. The crowd rose, not all at once but in waves, some slow, some reluctant, even the trustees, even the Wainwrights. Elijah didn't wait for their approval. He stepped off the stage the same way he'd stepped on, with quiet power. Outside, students pulled him into hugs, faculty offered handshakes. His mother cupped his face, eyes shining. "You did that, Eli," she whispered. "You really did." He smiled, just for her. "We did." Then a soft touch. Emily Wainwright's fingers slipped into his, giving a quick squeeze. Her dress was flawless, her smile practiced. "You were brilliant," she said. "You sure?" He teased, more playful than bitter. "Your dad didn't stand until the last second." She rolled her eyes. "Ignore him, he's just awkward in public." Elijah didn't reply. He'd learned awkward often meant condescending. But tonight wasn't for arguments. "Dad wants us at dinner," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Just family, Blue Fox Tavern, it's a tradition." Elijah hesitated. "Good idea." "One dinner," she pressed. He exhaled. "All right." But beneath the celebration, something nagged at him. Not fear, not quite suspicion, just a quiet tug at the edges of the night. He didn't know it yet, but the real speech hadn't happened. The real test was still coming. Elijah had never been to Greenwich before. He'd passed through once during an internship, but it wasn't the kind of place you stopped, unless you had a reason. Tonight, he did. Emily's family home sat atop a hill, hedges trimmed like walls, floodlights turning the lawn into a glowing carpet. A valet in white gloves waited by the curved driveway. "This isn't dinner," Elijah muttered, stepping out of the car. "This is a summit." Emily laughed, but she knew what he meant. She hadn't warned him about the valet, or the private dining room instead of a kitchen. Maybe she didn't think it mattered. Or maybe she didn't want to admit what it meant. Inside, the house felt cold, not in temperature but in atmosphere. Marble floors, oversized furniture, glass vases too perfect to touch, art with famous names, not meaning. Elijah had grown up in New Haven, not poor, but not like this. Dinner meant noise, warmth, shared plates. Here it was crystal, silver, and silence. Her mother greeted him at the door. "Elijah?" she said, testing the word. "Congratulations." "Thank you, Mrs. Wainwright." She didn't offer a hand, just a thin smile. "Come in," she said. "We're waiting." The dining room was set like a museum, crisp napkins, flickering candles, china gleaming. At the head of the table, her father scanned a wine list without looking up. "Grant," he said. "The man of the hour." Elijah nodded once. "Mr. Wainwright." He took the seat beside Emily, directly across from a woman in pearls who studied him like he was a museum exhibit. Her smile wasn't warm, wasn't cruel, just curious. "I'm Aunt Beverly," she said. "Emily's mother's sister. I hear you're quite the speaker." Elijah returned a thinner smile. "I try." "Impressive," she continued. "I suppose your school's very invested in elevating different voices these days." Emily stiffened beside him. Elijah heard the unspoken words but didn't flinch. "It's a competitive process. Nobody hands you that mic." Beverly smiled again like she'd scored a point. "Of course, I meant no offense." Her father cleared his throat. "So, law school, big deal. But I gotta ask, why? That field's not easy. All the reading, arguing, stress. Don't you guys burn out fast?" Elijah straightened slightly. "I don't mind stress. Grew up around people who had to argue for their lives daily. Law just gave that instinct structure." The silence that followed lasted just a beat too long. Her father chuckled. "You've got answers ready?" "I've been tested before," Elijah said, then added, "Dinner smells great, by the way." Emily's mother smiled, proud of the food, not the conversation. Salads arrived, then a wine Elijah couldn't pronounce. He didn't drink much anyway, especially when he needed his mind sharp. Tonight was one of those nights. He watched the table, not just faces, but the tiny movements. A side glance here, a fork dropped and snatched up too quickly. Small things, but they spoke volumes. Emily touched his hand under the table. He didn't look at her, but he felt it, a signal. "Hang on, just hang on. I read your article," Beverly said, between bites of sea bass. "The one on racial bias in housing law. You're passionate." Elijah's jaw tightened once before he replied, "It's personal." "But don't you worry," she pressed, "that framing it that way undermines the law's neutrality. Some think the system should be above emotion." He smiled without smiling. "Some people don't need emotion. The system already works for them." Her fork froze mid-air. The table hushed. "Didn't mean to offend?" she said again. "You didn't," he replied. "Just clarity." But that wasn't the moment things shifted. No, that came later, when the room pushed too far, and Elijah stopped pulling back. It started with a clink. Mr. Wainwright set down his wine glass, leaned forward, and stared at Elijah like he was appraising a stock, not a person. "So, Elijah," he began, "when you applied, did you check one of those boxes? You know, the ones for diverse candidates?" Emily froze, her fork hovering. Elijah didn't blink. "I filled out the same application as everyone else, sir." "Of course," Mr. Wainwright said, raising his hands. "Not saying you didn't earn it. But let's be honest, schools bend over backwards to hit quotas these days. Not your fault." Beverly chuckled softly. "It's true. My friend's son got rejected from Yale Law. Perfect GPA, judge's internship, fluent in Mandarin, lost his spot to someone with less traditional credentials." Elijah tilted his head. "Interesting how you know more about the person who got in than the one who didn't." "Excuse me?" "Sounds like you're assuming your friend's son deserved it more, because his resume looks like yours." Emily set her napkin down gently. "Dad, Bev, can we just eat?" Her mother stayed silent, still cutting her fish like nothing had happened. Mr. Wainwright leaned back. "Relax, it's a conversation. Thought we were celebrating, just trying to know the man you're so serious about." Elijah wiped his hands slowly with his napkin. "I think the question is whether you're trying to know me or corner me." "I'm being honest," Mr. Wainwright said. "I appreciate honesty, Elijah replied. Just prefer it without the condescension. Emily's uncle, a broad-shouldered man who'd been quiet, jumped in. Whoa, let's not make this bigger than it is. We're just talking. No, Elijah said, calm. You're not talking. You're testing. There's a difference. Beverly raised an eyebrow. Sensitive, aren't you? Sensitivity and awareness aren't the same thing, Elijah said. And awareness has kept people like me alive in rooms like this. That landed hard. No one replied immediately. Even the waitstaff moved faster, eyes down. Emily leaned in. I didn't know they'd come at you like this, she whispered. I know, he whispered back. But I did. The table shifted, not physically, but in the air. Elijah wasn't reacting. He was analyzing. And they didn't know what to do with someone who wouldn't fold or snap back. Her father tried again, lighter. So, Elijah, what's the plan after graduation? Where do you want to end up? Elijah held his gaze. DC clerkship, then civil rights litigation, public advocacy, eventually federal bench. Beverly blinked. Federal judge? Ambitious. Has to be, he said. If I aim lower, someone will move the target again. Her mother spoke for the first time in 20 minutes. That's a cynical way to view the world. It's a realistic one, Elijah answered. Emily tapped her fingernail against her glass, a nervous habit. Maybe we should all try to stay off hot topics. Elijah smiled slightly, more for her than anyone else. It's not the topics that are hot. It's the temperature in the room when you're the one being asked to justify your place at the table. The silence this time lasted longer. No laughter, no deflections. Even the air felt different. But Elijah wasn't done yet. What the table didn't realize was that the conversation was about to take a sharper turn, one that would change everyone sitting there. The main course arrived with awkward speed, grilled duck with blackberry sauce. The servers placed it carefully before guests who suddenly didn't seem hungry. Glasses were refilled. Beverly pretended to study her napkin ring. Mr. Wainwright stared at the centerpiece, swirling his wine. They seemed determined to bury the last 10 minutes under expensive food. Elijah wouldn't make it that easy. He cut into his duck, slowly, like time meant nothing. So, he said, voice steady. What made you all so curious about quotas tonight? I've been with Emily for almost 2 years. This is the first time you've said more than 5 words to me. Beverly laughed nervously. It's not that. We've been proud of Emily dating someone so accomplished. You're clearly very well-spoken. Elijah raised an eyebrow slightly. Well-spoken. The words landed harder than she expected. The room tensed. Mr. Wainwright jumped in. Come on now, don't twist things. No one's attacking you. We're just talking like adults. I agree, Elijah replied. So let's talk plainly, because I've noticed something. He set his fork down, calm and in control. This curiosity tonight, it's not about law school, not about my speech. It's about the fact that I don't look like what you thought Emily would bring home. Everything since we sat down has been a carefully disguised interrogation. Emily turned to him. She'd never heard him speak like this before. Measured, unwavering, cutting without raising his voice. Beverly leaned forward. Now hold on. No, Elijah said firmly but quietly. Let me finish. The table went silent again. I've had to explain my presence in so many rooms that I know the patterns by now, the forced politeness, the backhanded compliments, the little corrections from people who want to seem open-minded but can't let go of their assumptions. Her uncle scoffed. You think you've got us all figured out after one meal? No, Elijah answered. After a lifetime of similar ones. Mr. Wainwright's mouth twitched as he tried to stay composed. Look, maybe we said a few things awkwardly, but don't turn this into some accusation. You're young. Sometimes young people get carried away. Elijah didn't blink. I'm 24. I've passed the bar. Clerked for 2 judges. Been invited to speak at legal conferences with members of Congress in the room. I don't say things I haven't thought through. Her mother finally looked up from her plate. You're clearly very intelligent, but there's also something to be said for grace. I agree, Elijah said without hesitation. Which is why I've shown plenty of it so far. That stopped her. Emily exhaled shakily. I didn't want this to happen. I thought, maybe they'd see you the way I do. Elijah looked at her, his expression softening. You didn't think they'd say anything, and that's the difference. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth stung more than she expected. From the other end of the table, Beverly tried again. You're very composed, Elijah, but I wonder, are you always this defensive? How do you plan to work in high-stakes law? He turned to her slowly. I've worked in courtrooms where my clients were assumed guilty just for walking in. Argued against lawyers who called me aggressive for not backing down. Written legal opinions that made older men twice my age rewrite their arguments. He paused. If you think this dinner is high stakes, you haven't seen anything. The room absorbed that blow completely. A long silence followed. Even the duck looked unappetizing now, but the silence wouldn't last much longer. The conversation was shifting from subtle discomfort to something raw. Soon, someone would cross a line that couldn't be walked back. It wasn't the comments or the smug glances that did it. It was the silence, thick, drawn out, full of something unnameable that made Elijah decide he wouldn't leave anything unsaid. He picked up his water glass, took a slow sip, then looked directly at Mr. Wainwright. Let me tell you about a case. He began, voice quiet but clear. A single mother in Bridgeport, works 2 jobs, never misses rent. Comes home one day to find an eviction notice taped to her door. No warning, no reason, just a new landlord who wanted to upgrade the building. The table stayed silent as he continued. She was one of 6 families pushed out in 3 months, no legal grounds, just pressure and paperwork tricks. A beat. Then, she came to our legal clinic. I spent nights digging through records, lease agreements, city codes. We proved the landlord faked violations to break leases. Beverly shifted in her seat. Her uncle stared at his untouched food. We won, Elijah said. The court called it systemic abuse of process. That case sparked a citywide audit. But what I remember most... He paused. The way she cried when someone finally believed her. He set his glass down carefully. That's why I do this. Why I don't stay neutral. Because neutrality, when power's being abused, that's just taking the abuser's side. Emily scanned the table, waiting. Mr. Wainwright cleared his throat. Good story, you clearly care. But shouldn't the law stay objective? Elijah gave a tired laugh. There's no clean law, just people pretending their version of fairness is the only one that counts. Emily's mother finally spoke. Are you saying we're all biased? I'm saying everyone here came with assumptions, Elijah replied. And I walked in knowing I'd have to prove myself in one dinner more than most do in a lifetime. Emily started to interrupt. Maybe we should. It's okay, Elijah said gently. Then to Beverly. You asked how I handle high-stakes law being on guard all the time? Easy. I've been on guard since teachers called me disruptive for asking questions. Since classmates asked if I got into college because I could run fast. Beverly's mouth tightened. That's quite the generalization. I'm describing reality, Elijah said. Whether you recognize it says more about you than me. The waiter arrived with dessert, chocolate shavings melting over cream. No one touched it. Elijah leaned back. I didn't want tonight to be about defending myself. I wanted to meet Emily's family. But when every question's a test, he shook his head. You stop feeling like a guest, start feeling like a specimen. Emily took his hand openly this time. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not your apology to make. He squeezed back. Her uncle stood abruptly. Think we've heard enough? Elijah rose too, not aggressively, just to meet his gaze. I wasn't asking permission. Then, unexpectedly, a new voice cut through. From the far end of the table, Emily's cousin Trevor spoke for the first time all night. Used to think this stuff was exaggerated, he said, rolling his Rolex nervously. Figured talent always rises. All eyes turned to him. Then at work? Watched a new guy, white, average, get promoted over me for being leadership material. Same qualities my boss called too aggressive when I showed them. He looked at Elijah. Some of us start races with ankle weights. The room held its breath. Trevor continued. I stood late during your speech too, not because I disagreed, but because it hit different coming from someone who looks like us. Elijah gave a slight nod, the kind that said, I see you. Mr. Wainwright's face twisted like he was solving an impossible equation. Beverly sat stunned. Even Emily's mother seemed shaken. Didn't expect to feel ashamed tonight, Trevor admitted. Not of you, Elijah. Of how many times I've stayed quiet in rooms like this. For the first time all evening, the silence felt honest. Mr. Wainwright tried weakly. Not every conversation needs to turn into a lecture, Elijah finished. Only feels that way when you're hearing truths you've avoided. Or ignored, Trevor added quietly. Emily's mother pushed her plate away. We never meant to make you feel attacked. I know, Elijah said. No gloating, just fact. That's what makes it harder. Beverly folded her napkin with stiff hands. You made me feel like I couldn't say anything right. Elijah met her eyes. Now you know how that feels. No one had a response to that. The desserts sat untouched. Coffee grew cold in delicate cups. Even the carefully arranged lighting couldn't warm the chill that had settled over the room. Elijah stood again, this time with finality. Thank you for dinner. But respect isn't just about getting an invitation. It's about not having to earn your place at the table. Emily rose with him, slipping her arm through his. Across the table, Trevor gave a small nod before turning to the others. Maybe next time we'll ask questions to understand, not to test. The real moment of understanding wouldn't happen there at the table. It would come later, between Elijah and Emily, when the weight of the night's words could no longer hang unspoken between them. The car ride was quiet. Not tense, but the kind of quiet that made passing streetlights feel louder than they should. Elijah drove with one hand resting lightly on the wheel, the other in his lap. Emily stared out the window like the darkened sidewalks might hold answers her reflection couldn't give her. I didn't think they'd go there, she finally said. Elijah kept his eyes on the road. I did. I know you did. Her voice cracked slightly. I just hoped that maybe for once they'd surprise me. He turned onto Elm Street, passing closed storefronts. No one yelled. No slurs. But they made sure I knew I was a guest in their world, not someone who belonged. Emily leaned her forehead against the cool glass. I should have stopped them sooner. He glanced at her. Why didn't you? When she answered, the words came slowly pulled from somewhere deep. Because it's easier to pretend the people you love don't carry those ideas inside them, and because... She swallowed. Because I was afraid if I stood up to them, they'd look at me the way they looked at you. The admission hung heavy between them. Elijah pulled into a small parking lot behind shuttered shops, neon signs flickering in the darkness. The engine idled softly as they sat in the quiet. You love them, Elijah said. I do, she whispered. But tonight made me realize they don't really know me. Not the part of me that loves you. Elijah turned to face her fully. This isn't about choosing sides, it's about what you're willing to accept from the people you love. Emily's eyes shone in the dim light. I didn't see them clearly until tonight. I knew they could be snobbish, elitist, But I told myself it was harmless. It wasn't harmless tonight. I know. She turned in her seat to face him. Why didn't you leave? When it started, why stay? Elijah exhaled slowly. Because I've walked out of too many rooms already. Tonight I wanted to see what would happen if I stayed and told the truth. Emily nodded slowly. And I think, for the first time, some of them actually heard you, even if they hated every second of it. He reached over, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. What about you? I heard everything, and I hated how familiar some of it sounded, things I've let slide before because they weren't aimed at me. She took a shaky breath. I don't want to be that person anymore. The car felt still in a way that wasn't heavy, just honest. There's a lot we both need to unpack, Elijah said. I know, she replied, but I'd rather start now than pretend tonight didn't happen. A small smile touched his lips. That's the real reason I stayed, to see if you'd pretend. She took his hand fully then, fingers wrapping tight around his. I'm not pretending. Even as they sat there, processing the wreckage of what should have been a celebration, neither realized how far the ripples of that night would spread, or who wouldn't emerge unchanged. The next morning, Elijah's phone buzzed twice before he checked it. One new voicemail from an unknown number. He usually ignored those, but something told him this was different. He hit play. Hey Elijah, it's Trevor. I just wanted to say thanks for last night. You said things I've been swallowing for years. It messed me up in a good way. Already had 2 conversations this morning that felt different, honest. Not sure what happens next, but yeah, I needed that. The message ended with a quiet exhale, like even leaving it had taken effort. Elijah set his phone down. He didn't smile, but something in his chest felt lighter. That afternoon, a text from Emily. Call when you're free, Mum wants to talk. He waited a few minutes, not out of reluctance, but to steady himself. When her mother answered, she didn't waste words. Elijah, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I owe you an apology. He stayed silent, letting her continue. I didn't speak up when I should have. My silence said things I didn't mean to say. A pause. I'm not calling to make excuses, just to say I heard you. And I'm sorry. What did you hear? Elijah asked. She didn't hesitate long. That you didn't feel like a guest, that you felt on trial, and no one should feel that way at our table. Elijah nodded slowly. I appreciate you saying that. I don't know how to fix everything, she admitted. But I want to start by owning my part. That's a start, he said, and meant it. The call wasn't long and there were no grand resolutions, but it wasn't nothing. Later, Emily showed up at his apartment with takeout in one hand and a printed email in the other. This, she said, handing him the paper, is from Beverly. Elijah raised an eyebrow. She couldn't say it out loud. Small steps, right? He unfolded the email. It was brief, not warm, but honest. Elijah, last night challenged me in ways I didn't expect. I'm not ready to say more, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking about what you said. Beverly. You were right. Elijah read Beverly's email again, fingers tracing the printed words. I didn't listen, I reacted. I'm going to do better. Not for approval, but because it's overdue. He looked up at Emily. She sent this to you too? Yeah. Emily balanced a takeout container on her knees. Said she needed to sit with the discomfort before owning it. That's something, Elijah admitted. They ate side by side on the couch, close but not entangled. No performance, just presence. Emily's chopsticks paused mid-air. Do you regret going? No. Elijah stared at the rain streaking his apartment windows. I regret that it went exactly how I knew it would, but I don't regret staying. She rested her head against his shoulder. Me neither. His hand found hers, warm, certain. You know, he said after a beat, I used to think changing minds meant shouting louder, out-debating everyone. Now, he exhaled. Now I think it's about holding your ground until the room shifts, even just a little. Emily tilted her face up to his. You didn't just shift it, you redefined it. But for Elijah, it was never about conquering the room. It was about making sure the next person wouldn't have to walk in already braced for war. 2 days later, Elijah drove back to New Haven under a steel grey sky, the kind of drive he loved. Quiet roads, low music, thoughts unraveling slowly. He replayed the dinner like a film strip. Beverly's tightened voice when her assumptions cracked. Trevor's posture shifting mid-conversation. Emily's fingers lacing with his under the table. No traditional victory, no crushing defeat, just something necessary. At a red light, his phone lit up. 1. Trevor. Board approved my diversity initiative. Thanks for the push, even unintended. 2. Unknown number. Trevor shared your speech. Thank you for naming what so many of us feel. Shared with my team. We needed this. Elijah set the phone down, screen glowing faintly. He'd never wanted to be a symbol. Just a man who knew what it meant to enter rooms where people expected him to leave quickly. This time, he hadn't just stayed. He'd changed the air. Another buzz. Emily. Thinking of you. This weekend didn't fix everything, but it broke what needed breaking. The words settled in his ribs, heavier than they looked. Home. His apartment driveway welcomed him with familiar cracks in the pavement. No valets, no marble fountains, just the distant thump-thump of a basketball game 3 blocks over. Elijah sat in the idling car a moment longer, remembering every swallowed comment, every backhanded, "You're so articulate," every time he'd been treated like an exception rather than an equal. This time, he'd spoken. This time, someone listened. It wouldn't transform every room, but some. Some would never look the same. As he turned the key in his door, one thought crystallized. Brilliance isn't volume. It's clarity so undeniable the room must adjust, or admit it refuses to. Maybe next time someone like him walked in, they wouldn't be a visitor. They'd be recognized as what they always were. Someone who belonged.